Hey, it's Ollie again, and this is Infinity Build Part 3. I got my aileron servos installed, as you can see. Basically the same process as the flap servos, except for the servo arm. I didn't have any offsets or anything. I just stuck them straight up when I put the servos in, and I just centered the flaps and then taped up the aileron to the flap and basically glued the servo in. One thing I didn't mention is I always trim down my servo wires. So you can see this is the trimmed wire, and this is the length that I took off. Sometimes I make them really short, just like 20, 30 millimeters. But anyway, yeah, you cut four of these off, you're probably saving, I don't know, 5 grams or something. So it's worth doing, I guess, if you have the time. And I just crimp on new connectors and put I don't cut and solder. I just crimp on the connector. Yeah, so I'm gonna hook up the servo and put the servo cover on. I've already put the flap servo cover on, as you can see here. And I guess I'll show you guys a few things I do with these connectors and the servo covers. Okay, so I have my connector in here, and what I do is I use a little bit of this goop. It's basically shoe goo, a different brand, sort of flexible glue, and I just put a little bit on the connector like this, just to make sure it doesn't pop out during flight or anything. And if you need to pull the plug out, it pulls right out, so it's not a big deal. So that's good. And then I'll just stuff the wire in the servo bay a little bit, get it out of the way, like that. And then the next thing to do is to put the servo cover on. And I use a really thin double-sided tape for that, but you can just tape the outside too. But I'll show you the way I do it. Here's the servo cover. See if I can get this thing off. This is really nice because it's actually carbon and it's painted to match the wing. But the really nice part about the Infinity is that it comes pre-cut and trimmed and everything, so you don't have to do any work to it. It goes right in without any work and fits perfectly. So we're gonna put this on, and this is some 3M really super thin double-sided tape. I got it a long time ago. And I don't remember what number it is or what it's called or anything, but I'll try to find it and put a link in the description. And it's just like a really thin film, as you can see. And I'll show you guys how I use this to install the servo covers. Just makes the wing a little cleaner, and you don't have tape going across your servo bay. So here's the servo cover, and I've put some tape around the edges. And all you do is you put the tape on, rub it down really good, and then just start lifting it up, and you can see it's super thin. It's basically just like a film. Yeah, but that's it. Peel all this up and then stick it on the servo bay, and then once it's on the servo bay, just rub the edges really good. And I find that over time, this stuff gets really sticky and kind of firm, and I've never had one of these pop off in flight, so this is the way I like to do it. The last thing I'm going to do on these wings, and then I can basically call them done, is put some clear packing tape on the roots, top and bottom, just to protect the carbon and the paint from the tape that I use to attach the wing to the fuselage when you assemble the model to go flying. So I'm just going to use some of this just regular old packing tape, and I'm going to put about an inch all the way around, top and bottom, and trim it real clean to the wing root. And then the wings are done, and we'll do a little bit more work on the fuselage, and hopefully we'll get this thing flying pretty soon. I got the packing tape on the wing root. I don't know if you can see it. You can barely see the line there. So that pretty much completes the wings. The next thing I got to tackle is gluing the wire harness this part into the fuselage. Might be a little tricky, so I gotta stare at it for a little while and figure out a way to get it in there and make sure everything lines up good. So I'm gonna move on to that job. This is the 4-pin Dean sector that comes with the Infinity kit, and I'm getting ready to glue these into the fuselage. So what I've done is I've ground off this little lip here, as you can see on this one, on both sides, and I've really scuffed up the connector to prepare it to get bonded into the fuselage. So I'm going to do the same thing I did to this one, and then I'm going to prep everything to glue these inside the fuselage, and I'll get back. Alright, I have the wires in the fuselage. I put a little extra heat shrink on the harnesses here, and what I'm going to do is once the connectors are glued in, I'm going to move these up here and tack these with some glue on the side of the fuselage, just to make sure they're out of the way of the battery, because I plan on putting my battery here. And next thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use some of this mold release wax, just a little bit, and I'm going to put some around the hole here for the connector on both sides of the fuselage, and I'm also going to put some around the connector and in the wing root. And after I do that, I'm gonna loosely assemble the wings onto the fuselage and put some glue on these and slide everything together, and hopefully that'll kind of tack them in, and then I'll go back through this hole and put some extra glue on from the backside. So I'm going to do that right now. So I have the Infinity set up on the workbench here, and I have connected the Dean's plugs into the wing, and I put some epoxy with a little bit of microbloons in it just to thicken it up slightly so it wouldn't run. And basically what I'm going to do is just push the wings together and let it cure up overnight. I got the wings pushed together and everything seated together nicely, so we'll wait for this to cure, and tomorrow we can see if the connectors will be stuck in the fuselage when I pull the wings off. The other thing I've done is I've glued the heat shrink I put around the servo wire harness against the sides of the fuselage, just to keep them out of the way of the battery when I put the battery in. And that basically completes most of the construction for the Infinity, or the assembly I should say. She's getting pretty close to being done. Next thing I'm gonna do, I guess in the next video, hopefully I'll be able to show you, is I'm gonna 3D print some kind of wire holder thingy to keep these wires from pushing up against the rotating part of the motor. I'm thinking it'll be some kind of clip that'll clip around here and maybe notch into these holes and have like a tongue coming off for the wires to sit on. And I might even have it come down and around the back of the motor to protect anything from pushing into the back of the motor while it's operating. But we'll see. So this is going to wrap it up for part 3, I guess, and we'll see what happens in the next installment.